All right, I think I'll begin. My name is Alcorn. I started at Atari back in 1972. I was employee number 3. Atari was started as a partnership of Ted Dabney, Nolan Bushnell, and Larry Bryant, a programmer back in those days. And long story short, Atari did very well. Thank you. And I've been interviewed by a few different organizations. You may have seen some of that on the net. But one of my favorite, which you may not have seen, I'm going to show for you now. If we can get this to work.
Moltar. Moltar. Moltar!
What?
Start the show.
I'm busy.
How about letting Daddy take a shot at it?
Okay, whatever. Oh!
No good comes of the video game, son.
Big jerk.
Start the show, jackass. I know you're not playing that game again.
What game?
It'll rot your mind. For the love of Pete, look at what it did to Zorak. He was a good kid, a choir boy.
More like a vandal.
Straight A student.
I like to bust
Captain of the 4-H Cucumber Squad.
Got anything that needs busted?
Ate his vegetables.
And baby ducklings.
An all-American boy. That laid eggs. Look at him now. On the fast track to Stupid Town.
You got a quarter?
Sorry.
Got a quarter on you?
I don't know.
Hey, you got a quarter?
I don't know anything about that.
Okay. You got a quarter?
Absolutely.
All right. 25 cents. All right, now just distract that idiot ghost for me, will you?
Yeah.
Ah! It's that guy who was staring at me in the bus station and making strange noises. Everybody keep your cool. Don't make any sudden moves. You there, identify yourself.
Mr. Pong.
Pong. Pong.
Pong.
Pong.
Pong.
Pong.
Pong.
Pong.
Pong.
Pong.
Pong. Space Ghost.
Yeah?
I think Mr. Pong is my father.
What? Huh? That's impossible. Wait a minute. Put on your thinking cap, Space Ghost. He does have beady, cold-blooded eyes and emanates evil.
But that would mean he and Zorak's mom had to,
Egad!
We had a lot of late-night parties and hot tub experiences. I can't talk about too much.
Father!
Well, I'm having nightmares tonight.
Can I hug him?
No.
Think the bug's losing it.
You're all nuts. You with that stupid video thing of yours. It's not even a good game, like an Etch-a-Sketch. And you, shacking up with a mantis. It's just nasty, son. Get help, sicko.
If you don't like it, do whatever you want, but I'm not doing anything else.
Oh, tough guy, huh? What's the worst thing you've ever done, Mr. Pong?
Oh, today...
No. Any time in the past 30 years is just fine. Dig deep into your well of horrific deeds.
I've relieved many children of their lunch money over the years,
You
and it's gone
animal.
to help me enjoy life more. I think it's gone to a very good cause, and I'm very happy to be part of that.
You, sir, are a sick, twisted man.
My dad.
All right, who's got a quarter?
Get this done. Okay. Let's see if I can do this. There it is. There we go. All right. Yeah, so I'm going to give a little history of my involvement and how I got there and how Atari came to be. I was fortunate enough to grow up in San Francisco, and I was kind of precocious. We had our own little lab where we made chemical stuff, things that went boom. This was back in when I was in high school in the late 60s. We got away with it. Minimal damage, some, but minimal damage. I got into UC Berkeley on a football scholarship. I didn't really have the grades to get in, but I got in through the back door, and the Vietnam War was going on, so there was certain inspiration to be in college at that time. I also had, prior to that, grew up in a neighborhood where my neighbor had a television repair shop, and I worked in that when I was in junior high school, right on through high school, and in fact, it gave me a skill. By the time I was in college, I was a journeyman TV repairman back in the days when television sets had vacuum tubes. So I understood them very well, and at the same time, I managed to get a degree in electrical engineering and computer science. I did not want to do digital stuff. I wanted to do analog stuff, radios, things like that. I just thought digital was ones and zeros. Wasn't as interesting, but thank goodness Cal forced me to learn this stuff. Came in handy. There was an event at Berkeley called People's Park. This was during a lot of the protests and the riots, and there was a big event back in, gosh, when was it? Probably 69, 70. And there was a clash between the students and the police over the use of a park. I took some pictures of that event, got in the book. I was also a witness of a shooting. One guy, three people were shot with buckshot during that thing. There was real confrontation. So that, I went through that stuff. So I was a bit of a anarchist, a young student, radical, revolutionary, sort of. I have a bumper sticker from the anarchist that says, "There's no government like no government." Anyway, I managed to get a job at Ampex back in 1968 while I was still a student, a work-study thing. I think it's a great idea. I think any kid going to college should explore that. It's kind of like being an intern, only you get paid, and you're working in the field, in my case, that I wanted to be. And, you go to college, you want to be an engineer. They don't really teach you how to be an engineer. They teach you the academics of it. The actual life of an engineer you may not enjoy. I did. I love building things, so it worked out real well. And I learned a lot about analog and digital video circuits and how to make high quality video displays generate from videotape. Ampex really invented videotape recording, and they had some of the finest engineers, Ray Dolby, Kurt Wallace, lots of really great people that I learned from. And Nolan Bushnell was there. Nolan was a graduate from the University of Utah, graduated last in his class. He drove all the way out. He wanted a job at Ampex, and he got that job at Ampex. He was a good engineer, but not a great engineer, but he was quite the entrepreneur. And when he was at University of Utah, he saw Space War. Now, Space War in those days existed only on a PDP-1 computer. So you had to have a PDP-1 computer, which was the hot computer of its day. And Nolan saw that. Nolan also had a job at Lagoon Amusement Park, running the pinball arcade, and understood the arcade dynamics, quarters coming in, how that worked. And he saw the Star Wars game, Space War game, and he thought, boy, I could make money off it if I could put a coin slot on it. Unfortunately, the computer sold for like $1 million, and it just wasn't any way to do that, but that was the passion in the back of his mind. When he came to Ampex, he and his office mate, Ted Dabney, started working on it, how to do it, how to rasterize it, how to make it work on a regular television set. And they took that to a company, the only coin-operated game company west of Chicago that I knew of, Nutting Associates. and they built a little game called Computer Quiz, film strip game. So Nolan and Ted went there and quit Ampex, which was a revolutionary, stupid thing to do back in 1969. You don't quit, or 70. Ampex was the key. You had a career, you get a gold watch, you get a pension, and to do startups was unheard of. It's really a radical, stupid thing to do, especially when you had no money, poor, absolutely no money. So they started this little consulting company called Syzygy, and they worked at Nutting Associates. They got computer space out. I hope there's a computer space on the floor there. It was very similar to the Space War game. Very complex, hard to play with buttons, but that was the game. And they sold several hundred of those machines. And they, at that point, they tried to get an equity position at Nutting. Nutting had nothing to do with it. So they went off and started Syzygy on its own and hired me. I was the employee number 3 at Syzygy. I had 10% of the stock in the company. I figured, what the hell, I was young, I was 24 years old. I figured it would fail, and I'd go back to work at Ampex when things got bad. Did not work out that way. Nolan gave me a project. This was the headquarters, the world headquarters of where Syzygy got started. Shortly after, so Nolan gives me this project, which was Pong, which was the truth is, it was the simplest game he could think of. It had one moving spot, 2 scores, net, and he didn't tell me it had to have sound. To this day, it's still the simplest game, and it's still a playable game. What he didn't tell me, well, he also told me he had a contract from General Electric to make it a consumer game, which I knew was like, wow, that's got to have cost of goods sold of like, $30, $40. And I said, that's going to do that. But, and of course, the fact that nobody from GE ever called us, wrote us a letter, or came by, never occurred to me that this was all a lie. But it was a lie to inspire me to work hard. So I started wire wrapping, and he was going to throw the game away. It was simply an exercise, and I believe Nolan had a plan for a more complicated game than Computer Space, a driving game, but he wanted me to cut my teeth on a very simple game. Only took 3 months to do. And but because he never told me it was a throwaway, he wanted me to really put my heart into it. I started to make it playable. I started to do things like the speed up. If it was just one speed, that was no fun, so I added speed, and then I added the ball deflecting off the paddle at different angles, and got it to be so it was kind of playable. Then Nolan at the end said, I said, well, there it is. It's all wire wrap, very crude. He says, got to have sound. I said, oh, come on. He says, I want to have the roar of a crowd of thousands. I didn't know how to do that with digital circuits. Ted Dabney said, I want boos and hisses. I sure couldn't do that either. And I was already way over budget, but no one didn't seem to mind the fact that I was way over budget. But okay, so I went in there and poked around and found tones that were already in the vertical sync generator and pulled those out. I used like a half of a chip to do all that. And I said, there's the sounds. And if you don't like them, Nolan, you wire wrap it yourself. You do it. I love it later when there were articles written about how brilliant the sounds were. I really thought that was great. So it came out about 75 chips, and we said, well, let's put it in a box. Nolan said, gee, it might be playable. We had a route at that time. We had about 50 or so pinball machines that they bought from money. We had no capital investment. We had retained earnings from the royalties of Computer Space, and we used those to buy pinball machines, which we had on a route out in the neighborhood, and that was cash flow. Also provided lunch for us once in a while. So over the weekend, we put it in a box. Put it in a package and bolted if you'll see here, some details. This thing can work there. There's a coin mech from a laundromat we bolted to it. There is the wire wrap board that is really, really crude. It was never meant to go anywhere. And there's a TV set I bought at the drugstore, Walgreens, for $75, and turned it into a monitor. And no instructions whatsoever, just the word Pong. And I didn't think, and we put it in Andy Cap's Tavern on a barrel, and why anybody would play it. First off, it's one of the only games ever that required two people. There's no one-player version. There's no instructions, and people would just play it, and so, okay. We'll see what could go wrong. That's the actual place. It was called Andy Cap's, now it's Rooster T. Feathers. They're a comedy club. Nice place. So then, all of a sudden, maybe you've heard the story, I'll say it briefly, the machine crapped out, stopped working within about 10 days, which didn't surprise me given its construction. And so I went out there to fix it, and the first thing I would do when I'd fix a machine, was I'd open the coin box and get a free play if it was running at all, to see if it was running. If it was, let somebody play it while I looked in the back, see what was going on. Well, I opened up the coin door of this thing, and it was just filled to the top with quarters, and it just wouldn't take any more quarters. So I filled my pockets with quarters and got it working again, and gave my business card to Bill Gaddis, the owner of the bar, said, hey, if this happens again, you let me know. And went in the next day to the office and dumped these quarters on Nolan's table, and I said, something's going on here, Nolan. They like this thing. And what was happening, Bill Gaddis said he's never seen this. He says, because running a bar, you get opened up at 9 o'clock or something, and there's always a few customers that are there when the bar opens, if you know what I mean. And they're not there to play video games. He said, now I got guys that come in and they don't even buy a drink, they just play the video game all day. So something was going on. So we decide, long story, to, Nolan did have a contract from Bally. Very important. Bally was the dominant coin-op manufacturer in America, in the world probably, and they were our goal. That was what we wanted, and they were kind of smart, a little on the colorful side, if you know what I mean. But they were also pretty sophisticated in the sense that they did a contract with us to do a video game for them, a pinball machine, and some kind of a multiplayer arcade attraction that Nolan negotiated. The reason that's smart is because this was an emerging technology, maybe. Their computer space had been out there, and it's really smart when you're a company like Bally to keep your friends close and your enemies closer, and to have a handle on what is this new technology, that way they had an inside track to know what was going on. So I'm designing this Pong game that Nolan's going to throw away, and all of a sudden it becomes a hit, and Nolan says, Jesus, I got to give these guys a video game. And I don't want to give them Pong because I know it's great. I want to keep Pong for myself. At this point, we were not manufacturing. There were like 5 of us in the office. We were so small, Nolan hired his babysitter, Cynthia Villanueva. After high school, she'd come in and answer the phone, and her job was, if someone wanted Nolan, I'll see if I can find him. He was right there. It was so small. I mean, it looked bigger, That's the kind of place we were. But Bally saw what was going on, but we didn't tell them that much about Pong. The word was getting out, and the competitors like, holy shit. So Nolan convinces Bally they don't want Pong. He went back there. I wish I was there how he did that. But then he had to come back and convince Ted Dabney and I that we were going to manufacture Pong. And we were not. Our idea was to be a game development company and license Bally and receive checks and cash checks. That was the business model. Nolan realized that that's not where the money is. The money is in making the damn things. So he had to convince us we were going to start manufacturing. And okay, we did it. We had nothing. We had no idea what we were doing. Ignorance was a big motivator. We didn't know how hard it was. So we did it. So Pong goes into production. So that is a logic board with about 72 ICs in it, which does Pong. I'm often asked, did I write the code for Pong? There's no microprocessor. At this point, this is 1972. The only microprocessor we just introduced was the Intel 4004, and you could watch it work. It was very slow, so there's no code. And a lot of young people have trouble understanding how you can build anything that does not have code. It's a separate talk, but that's how it was. Uses TTL ICs. So in fact, from an engineering standpoint, television in those days was very much an analog thing. I knew this very well. Fixing TVs and then creating signals of beautiful stuff with Ampex. But I had learned, they had forced me to learn digital on the job or at school. And so I learned it on the job, and I was young, I knew digital technology, and I knew analog technology, so I was able to bridge the gap. And so what Pong is an all digital, pure digital synchronous circuit that generates an analog signal, which is a video signal. So the original game had the single printed circuit board, a $75 black and white TV set, and a bread pan for coins. Not the best idea, but hey, that was the beginning. And the power supply was over here. A lot of other machines in those days had separate power supplies you could buy. I didn't like that. This is much cheaper. I think I'm kind of proud of putting the whole thing on one board. So it made it pretty inexpensive and simple to build. And he wanted to build 100 machines a day. I go, no, it's crazy. We got nothing. It's just, he did. There was the flyer for the machine, the original flyer. And this is the team. There's Ted. There's Nolan. There I am with lots of hair. And this is Fred Marinchak, who did not last more than a month after that picture was taken. He was our chief finance guy. And I'll say no more. Yeah, so Pong became a hit. And in that coin-op business back in those days was roaring. There was Allied Leisure, there was Williams, Gottlieb, bunch of different companies, and even Nutting Associates, who passed on a license for Pong, copied it. Everybody copied it. My count, now Nolan's numbers are totally different than mine, and I don't know whose are right, but I think we built about 3,000 Pong arcade machines. And I think the world saw maybe 10,000 altogether, something like that. So, and we didn't have it. We had patents, but they were of no use in that industry. So, in fact, here's an old low-res picture of a factory floor building Pongs. We had a that little first office space I showed you. You could do maybe 10 machines on the floor. So we rented a roller skating rink up the road, which was a lot of fun. I loved it because I had a motorcycle. I had a Triumph 650 motorcycle. And I'm like, wow, we rent this big old roller skating rink. It's empty. Roller skating, I could drive my motorcycle indoors. That'd be cool. Well, don't do it because you get one of those shellac varnished floors, you know, and they get dust on it. Very slippery. So that party ended. So then all of a sudden we become a dominant force within a year in coin-op, and we're almost as big as Bally at this point within a year. And Nolan, and this is, I think, a very key learning in a lot of businesses and stuff. Whereas Bally, for example, saw themselves as a coin-operated game manufacturer, dominant in that business. Coin-operated games, arcade games, was our first thrust, but Nolan's, the motto for Atari was innovative leisure, not innovative coin-op. It was a broader thing. And from the get-go, Nolan was really impossible to work with. He had, here, I don't know if you can read this. I will try to read this. This is a debate, an argument that Nolan and I had. August 3rd, 1973. We were a little less than a year old. And he says here, in accordance with a concise business plan, of which we did not have any, I never saw it. We're going to have well, there was a whole list of items that we had to have. I'm sure I can read some of them. A minimum of 4 production-ready machines, a lot of machines in the hopper, designed for coin door. We got to have a better coin door. Bread pan wasn't going to cut it. A lot of staff. So Nolan had the attention span of a golden retriever. So a video game design in those days take like 6 months to come out, and he would change the design, the project halfway through. Nothing would ever finish. So he wanted his own little F troop that he could go directly goof around. 20-player gotcha, packaging for a Dr. Pong, puppy Pong. I've got one in my garage. This is what, number 6, packaging and printed circuit board for a color modulated consumer Pong. Now, you know what that means? That's another industry. That's the home game industry. That's number 6 on the list. And I go, and then number 8, a booth for IAAPA. Well, frankly, I was getting bored. I'm a 24-year-old engineer. I'm not a manager. All of a sudden, I'm a manager managing other engineers doing this stuff, and it wasn't as much fun as doing the engineering myself. And I knew that I could not to do this home Pong, you had to have a custom chip. And I could not do a custom chip, but Nolan wouldn't stop. And so we had these arguments, so I says, okay, fine, I'm gonna go do it. And I'll get as far as I can. When it blows up, I'll tell you I told you so. I got it to work. It was weird. It was like when a dog chases a car, what happens if the dog catches the car? You know, what do you do? We had, one day the chip came back from the foundry and it worked. And it was like, oh my God. You know, we're in the business, because I didn't think it was ever gonna happen. I'd never had no plan for that. So, so Nolan sent this document out, and at the bottom he said, statements concerning our manufacturing capacity are inapplicable to the above design schedule. The fact that we have no manufacturing capacity, why am I doing all this? So I write a memo back to Nolan from engineering. In accordance with your memo dated August 3rd, will statements regarding our financial capability be applicable to the above design schedule? And Nolan wrote on it, no. I sent it back. Okay, damn the torpedoes, full ahead. We're gonna have no money, no capacity. Let's just ship it and see how far we get. And goddamn, the chip worked. And what happened at that point was we called, I gave coin-op engineering to Steve Bristow, who passed away recently, God bless him. And I focused 100% on doing this consumer chip. There were 3 of us, Harold Lee, Bob Brown, and then my wife also helped. And the key thing was we cold called Sears Roebuck, Tom Quinn. We called Sears. We had no idea. There was no consumer electronics going on in Silicon Valley. There was nowhere to go. And so we did not have a business plan, or this wouldn't have happened. So we got this thing, and one of our marketing guys calls Sears. My recollection, there's a couple different versions of the story now, but my recollection is that Gene cold called Sears Tower, that big building in Chicago, and basically got a hold of the buyer in Sporting Good that was selling the Magnavox Odyssey game, told him what we had. He came out 3 days later, surprised us, showed up on our door at 8 o'clock in the morning with a suit and tie. I roll in about 9 o'clock, not dressed as nice as this. Nolan and the rest of the guys were nowhere to be seen. And Tom was pretty much astonished, but he got along with the gag. And it was a great help getting us out. And he was our exclusive customer for Home Pong for the first year. And in fact, one of the attendees has a unit there, the original Pong box that just show it to that had the plastic in it, and it sold to Sears, so it said Sears on it, not Atari. But we were happy. They paid their bills, and they got us through the FCC. Thank God. So, and then another interesting business story. We did not want to be sole source to Sears. Sears said, we're fine, don't worry about it. No one read a book, and oh no, you don't want to be sole source. If they turn you off, you're dead. So we're going to take it to the Toy Fair in New York, and we're going to show it to all the other companies, and we're going to try to get broader distribution. So Nolan, Joe Keenan, the president, Gene Lipkin, and myself went to the Toy Fair in New York in 1974. It's in February. And we had a booth showing Pong, and home version of Pong to all the buyers there. And I met people, the top guy from Penny's and all these big companies. You know how many Pongs we sold to other people? 0, not one. That industry is not aggressive at all. Their basic statement was, well, how many did you sell last year? Well, none. Well, we'll take 10% of none. And so we had an exclusive, and thank God we did, because they took care of advertising, they paid their bills. So that was our relationship with Sears. There's a prototype. This is the prototype I built, my wife built, for the consumer Pong. There is the wire wrap that emulates the chip. This is a box. We did not have the plastic. This is made out of wood. I thought, gee, the hardest thing is the chip. The plastic case, just a plastic case, just order a plastic case. How hard could that be? Well, the chip took like 5 months. The plastic case took 9 months, cost more money, had more risk. I learned by trial and error, and we were bailed out at the end. Nolan was, I still have a prototype of a home Pong in a wood box, handmade with plastic. Just in, Nolan was so panicked, he didn't trust me. I don't blame, I don't know how we did it. We did it. But there's the Sears Telegame one, and that got out. And then the cartridge games. There was a run of about a year or two where we built a couple different versions of ball and paddle games, dedicated chips, but we realized that it really had to be a programmable thing with a cartridge base. And we were not the first. Fairchild Channel F had a system out there, but this was a very important task, and there was so much going on down in Sunnyvale that I really couldn't devote my resources, and we had a great engineering group up in Grass Valley called Cyan Engineering with Ron Milner, Joe DeCour, Steve Mayer, Larry Emmons, and others, and they were given the task to design a cartridge-based video game. Now, if I can get a little technical here, the difference, all the other cartridge-based video games from Fairchild and Television, whatever, were designed by semiconductor companies, and their goal is to sell semiconductors. Yeah.
RCA also made a system, the RCA Studio 2.
Yes. Yeah, it didn't have a lot of distribution, but yes, there were lots of them. But the approach was to let's do a memory map and have a bit in memory representing every pixel, and then have hardware objects defined. So there was a lot of hardware support to make that happen. Yes, Joe?
I'll cover that in more detail.
Yes.
at 2 o'clock.
Yes, that's great. I just want to get an overview. I'm not going to steal your thunder. And so
I'm here to support him.
since we didn't want to have a lot of memory, these guys made the decision, there were like 12, 15 chips, expensive chips in those systems, and we wanted a better system. And these guys, in a remarkably short period of time, designed a system that was bare bones, and you've already heard about how effective it was because it wasn't cast in concrete. You could do all kinds of strange things to it that we never planned. But that was the VCS and the cartridge system. And we hired John Ellis. We actually stole the consumer engineering design team from National Semiconductor, basically on the basis that Atari was one hell of a lot more fun to work at than National Semiconductor. There is one of the versions of the Stella prototype. There's another version that Joe built at the Computer History Museum. Oh, that's Nolan and Lori, the hot tub. I'm not in there. Anyhow, Atari was a product of the 60s. We were all young. I remember when Manny Gerard, the president of Warner, came by to buy the company, looking around. He said, "Where's the pit that you throw you people into when you turn 30? There's nobody in this place over 30. What's going on?" "Oh, well, we're young." And we bet the company every year. It was a real exciting, risk-taking environment. I mean, when we did the consumer stuff, it occurred to us that if the product, I'll tell you a story. Nolan, and one of the things that Sears provided was capital. You needed capital to build inventory, among other things. And we, the venture capital guys, wouldn't talk to us, although we did have money by that time from Sequoia Management. Don Valentine had put money in, but we risked the whole company. We did not have the money, and Sears was good enough. They had a bank and they did the financing. They financed our original stuff, and Nolan and Joe, the president, were back there at having lunch in the Sears Tower, at second basement with the other people, and one of the guys at the table said, "Oh, you guys are the Atari guys." We'd gone into the Christmas book. They held up the Christmas catalog to put in the Atari Pong, which became the biggest product ever sold in the catalog. But we didn't know at that time. And this guy said, "Hey, Mr. Keenan, yeah, the last time we held that book up was for the Marvin Glass slot car, first slot car thing. And we built 50,000 of them, sold 50,000 of them. The problem was the slot car wouldn't get past the second turn. We had to buy them all back." And Joe came back and said, "Is this going to work, Al? You sure this is going to work?" Yeah, sure. What could go wrong? But if it didn't, it would have going to kill the company. It would have killed the company. But we didn't take ourselves that seriously, and we had a lot of fun. So, after Atari, Nolan started an incubator, the Catalyst. Things like ETAC, the first in-car navigation system, was built. Androbot, Sente Games, which got bought by Bally. Kuma was a software company, video game software company that I had, did not survive. What else? Afterwards, I went to work at Apple. Oh, when I was at Atari, I hired engineering, and one of the guys I hired was a hippie named Steve Jobs. He was, at the time, 18. He was a hippie, and that to me meant cheap. And he could solder. He could solder, and he had a lot of enthusiasm. And he had, and what happened was, remember I said Nolan had this short attention span. And so he wanted me to have engineers sitting around waiting for his every whim, and I didn't do that. When he got this idea for a game and he couldn't hold it in, so he found the one engineer that I wasn't watching, which was Steve Jobs, because Steve Jobs is not an engineer. He's not. He's a great tech, great visionary, but so he gives him this game Breakout to do, the coin-op game Breakout. And of course, Steve never said he couldn't do it. Jobs bought his buddy Woz, who was hanging out at Atari at the time, because Atari was much more fun to hang out at than HP. We had lots of video games, free play. And long story short, Woz built it in 4 days. Now that was weird, because when you walk in, as a manager, you walk into the engineering lab, I got about 3 teams working on various games, and there's certain projects, certain status going on. And all of a sudden, hey Al, check this out. And here is a finished video game that wasn't even under development. It's done. And I'm thinking, well, what the hell? How'd that happen? And that was Woz. Woz is a savant, a genius. And the problem was that the game, and Nolan had said they'd give him give Jobs $1,000 bonus for every chip less than 50, knowing that Pong had 72. And Breakout would obviously have to have more. Woz did it in like 20 chips. Nolan didn't say you had to be able to buy the chips. Minor problem. But hey, Nolan's a gambler, and he got up with the rules and paid the money. Some of the chips came out of HP, were stolen from HP. But, hey. And we couldn't sell the game, we couldn't manufacture it. Honest to God, was not decipherable by mere mortal engineers, so eventually I gave it to Don Lang, I think, and Don redid it with 100 chips, and it was buildable at that point, and it was a good game. So that's what that happened. And I worked at Apple, Digital FX. Later on I started in '93 a slot machine company, designed and manufactured slot machines in Palo Alto for Vegas. That was fun. Video games, Silicon Valley meets Vegas. that's a whole other story. That's the Odyssey slot machine. Then I worked in interval research, which was a lot of fun, doing real research, and did a consumer game. Anyway, I do some stuff at Hack the Future, a hackathon for kids. I'm teaching them how to solder here. So anyhow, I think that's it. Let's go to some questions. Anybody got questions?
Yeah, you need a mic runner? You need someone to run the mic around.
It's actually pretty easy to hear in this.
Yeah, let's speak.
When you come across an arcade Pong, it's usually fairly beat up, and all the computer space looks great. Was there any thought using fiberglass for the Pong cabinet?
The question was there any thought of using fiberglass for the Pong cabinet like fiberglass was used in computer space? And yes, there actually was a couple of prototypes made of a fiberglass cabinet, and I remember going over to the place. You ever watch them make a fiberglass boat or cabinet? Yeez, it's kind of smelly, and it's limited production. You only make one per mold per day, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I said no. We were very fortunate because there was a company in Silicon Valley at the time called PS Hurlbut, a big cabinet manufacturer that had far more facility and capacity than they could ever use, and they had all the right equipment, and they could help us design. In the early days, they designed the cabinets for us and manufactured reasonably high quality. So that was one of the things that made us succeed, the company PS Hurlbut. Yes, in the green shirt.
Which came first, Atari Pong or
Say that louder, please.
which came first, Atari Pong or Magnavox Odyssey?
Atari Pong or which? Oh, okay, good question. The Magnavox Odyssey came first. There's a lot of debate about that we stole their idea. It may be true that you could say that. The Magnavox Odyssey, I'll give Ralph Baer a tremendous amount of credit for having the courage to create a game that connected this device to your home TV. So it was the first device that actually turned the home television into a hot medium, right? It made a new kind of medium. It wasn't a great game, but it was the first of its kind. Nolan did go to a show, saw the Magnavox Odyssey, and I believe that's what inspired him to tell me to make Pong. Not that he thought we were stealing their great idea, he thought we were stealing their terrible idea that nobody would buy. And you ever see the movie The Producers, the play, This was like, I'm gonna build this thing, and we're gonna throw it away, and we're gonna build something better. And even though, we're stealing it from Magnavox, what's the difference? We're not going to sell any of them. So what could go wrong? Well, we're selling millions of them. It worked, much to our surprise. So clearly Magnavox was first with the device. Pong was credited with being the really first successful business video game to kind of launch the industry. Yeah, but no, it's true. Magnavox was there first. And you could go back in time. You could say that, what's his name with the PDP-1, Space War. That's currently Steve Russell. Yes, that is, by the way, if you're ever down to see the Computer History Museum in Sunnyvale, it's Mountain View, they have a PDP-1 running and playing computer space, and Steve Russell comes in occasionally. So that's, to me, that's the real basis of video games. But anyhow, yeah, in the back.
There was a bullet point that mentioned something about like a dead zone at the top.
Oh yeah, dead zone in the Pong.
Something deliberate, or was that like a limitation?
Yeah. Hang on just a second. Let me do that. Let me do. See if I can do that. Okay, so if you play Pong, the original Pong and the home version, the paddle does not go up to the top. Now when I'm designing, I had 3 months, I did the whole thing in 3 months. And when I did the paddle circuit, it used a chip called the 555 timer. And the way I used it, the paddle, it was a defect, didn't go all the way up to the top. I was gonna fix it later. I wanted to just move on. And it became obvious to me, to Nolan and everybody, that if you did not have that dead spot at the top where the paddle could not go up all the way, two good players could play Pong forever. And that would be the doom of it as a successful game. So that defect remained in there, and hence my motto, if you can't fix it, call it a feature. And that's what that was. But yes, that was an important feature in the game, brilliantly thought out. Yeah.
Was the Hitachi TV modified inside to interface with the board?
Yeah, it was only modified. I mean, again, I had the experience of fixing TVs, so I just took it apart. I used the antenna on the back. In those days, they had 4 screws on the back, 2 for VHF antenna, 2 for UHF antenna. I threw that stuff away and had one for ground, one for sound, and one for video, and I just tapped in. So it was a very simple mod. So we actually had to buy finished TV sets from Hitachi in cartons, throw away the antennas that came with them, and modify the parts. And that led to some problems because when we modified a set like that, we had no warranty or anything else like that. And so we were paying wholesale price, but they were actually there was a lot of money on the table, and that money tempted some buyers and stuff, sadly. But yeah, it was a very simple mod. And what happened was I could buy a monitor back in those days. Motorola made a beautiful, I shouldn't say beautiful, made a chassis monitor that was green. You might have seen them in airports if you're old enough, and they never worked. And they wanted like $500 for that. So I said, well, hell, I could buy a TV set that had the sound too, and a volume control you could barely get to. So that was our scrappiness, to just convert TVs into monitors. Saved a few $100s, yeah. Motorola was very upset.
So there were monitors available back then?
There were. Motorola had them. Yeah, there were. But they're not that cheap that I could find. And I knew how to modify TVs, so what the hell. Yes, sir.
What was the decision, what was the deciding factor to use Channel 3 for the Atari?
Channel what?
Channel 3.
Oh, good. Oh, man. Quick story. So typically any market, channel 3 or channel 4, there's a switch. You can go inside and switch it to channel 3 or 4. When we were doing the demo of that prototype that's in that box at the, oh no, this is the other one, to the Sears people, I hooked it up to a Sears TV on the 37th floor of the Sears Tower, and it wouldn't work, would not work. And I discovered they were broadcasting channel 3 on top of the Sears Tower. Yikes. So I had to retune it. And the retuning is off in here somewhere, all right? So I had to open up the bottom. See, this is a bunch of executives, vice presidents of Sears, and they're going to decide whether or not to buy this thing from us. We didn't have the chip working yet. This is our demo. It played, and I had to get it to work, and oh my God, I got it to work. But I had to open the box and do this while the marketing guy gave a song and dance. So I got it to work, played the game, and I forget his name now, one of the other top buyers. Previous claim to fame was the air-conditioned electric blanket, which I'm sure you've all heard of. Looked at me and he said, Mr. Alcorn, you're telling me that you're going to take that rat's nest of wires and put it on a little piece of silicone the size of your fingernail? I go, yes, sir. How are you going to solder the wires to it? I said, Jesus Christ, I'm dealing with the wrong crew here. Somehow we got out of, yeah, we managed to avoid that. But no, channel 3 or 4 was the market, and I got bit by that. So anyhow, maybe one more question?
Oh, do
One more? No more?
Oh yeah, about that chip. I mean, at that time, with your experience, like, can you say a little bit more about getting that nest into the chip? Like, was that kind of happening a lot of the time, or how did you do that?
Well, making custom chips, there's no such thing as ASIC at that time. Semiconductor companies made them themselves and sold them to you. We made our own. I hired a guy, Harold Lee, that knew how to do chips and circuits, and we just did it. He rented time on an Applicon system, and we found a semiconductor manufacturer, AMI, that built it for us, and we did it. It was a little strange. It was unheard of. I asked if Intel would be so kind as to make our chip for us. They were stunned. Nobody had ever asked them to make a chip, their design. One day, Bob Noyce, Gordy Moore, Andy Grove show up at Atari, and I'm the only exec there. And I give them the tour, and they looked around, and they passed on it wisely because they were too expensive. So, all right, well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.